Hello friends, welcome to second part of National Program for Capacity Development for Air Quality Monitoring, aligned with the National Skills Qualification Framework of India. Many of you might be there in the first part, which was focused on air quality management's induction program. And now this part focuses on city action plan and third party auditing training. So within this framework or within this particular program, this lecture is related to role of transportation sector in city action plan, because city action plan is targeted to reduce air pollution emissions from different sectors so that air quality improvement can be achieved. And transportation sector is one of the major sectors or sources of air pollution. That's why the significant role or important role of transportation we will look into in this particular presentation, and we will see how it can be this knowledge or different kind of information which we will share in this presentation that would be helpful to reduce emission from the transportation sector. So if you look into this transportation sector and city action plan relationship. So first of all, we will understand the relationship of transportation sector and the city action plan, why it is important in city action plan, and then we will go further. So at global level, if you look into these global greenhouse gas emissions, so the transportation sector is also one of the major sectors. If you look at this particular image, where other sectors are also dominating, but 22% of global greenhouse gas emissions come from the transportation sector. And within this 22%, basically, if you look into different categories of transportation sector, like trucks or aviation or ships, etc., then 40% come from the automobiles, cars, etc. 34% comes from the trucks, and 11% from aviation, 11% from these ships, etc., and 4% then some like railways or other kind of modes. And if you look into this energy generation, which comes basically from fossil fuel burning, and transportation sector at present basically use the fossil fuel. That's why emissions in large quantity comes from traffic or vehicular sector. If we try to look into Indian transportation scenario, then you will look into that road, rail, air, coastal shipping, and inland water transport. All these transportation modes are used in India. Although inland water transport is in nascent stage, but the road is dominating kind of transportation mode. You can look into this passenger traffic share. It this road transport shares around 89%. And then rest of the 10 is with the railway and aviation only 1%. So there is huge scope in aviation, you can say, in one way. But when we are going to target the emission sources, then at present this road is the sector where there is huge scope to do some intervention in terms of policy, in terms of programs, in terms of technology, so that emissions can be reduced significantly. Similarly, this freight traffic share is also, the road is dominating like 62%, and the second is 31% by the rail. So from the rail, it is twice, you can see. And if we look into the energy related CO2 emissions, around 13 to 14% of the India's energy related CO2 emissions come from the transport sector, basically. And of this particular share, the 90% of that 14% is basically from the road transport. So that's why road transport is very, very important to target. When we look into implementation agency of NCAP in targeted cities, so there are like pollution control boards, urban local bodies, transport related department, and other agencies. So if you look into this particular chart, you will find that each state has quite significant part of the this role of transport department. So again, this also signifies the importance of transportation sector. If you look into distribution of sector-wise action plans under NCAP, which is going on in different states, so you will find that around transport-related action plans are 38%, and road dust management related 13%. So total 51%, activities are related to transportation basically. So again, this is predominant sector. So its significance lies in that. And then if you look into again this chart where state-wise and city-wise action plans are shown. So again, this transport-related action plan, like in Delhi, in Odisha, or in Andhra Pradesh, it's huge scope is there in transportation sector because of several reasons, and the prime reason is that lot of emissions come from the transportation sector. Well, so basically there is the important role of the transportation sector in city action plan, which we have seen, and this objective of this particular module is centered upon this role of transportation sector in city action plan. So I believe, or I hope, that after attending this particular presentation, the participants will be able to understand the correlation between the transport sector and air pollution. Okay, there are so many other sources, but you will be able to understand the correlation or relationship between the transport emissions and the air quality of urban areas. And you will also be able to analyze the transportation generated air pollution in cities, the category wise, you can say, from how much from heavy vehicles, or how much from two-wheelers, etc. You will also be able to appreciate conventional and innovative mitigation measures. When I talk about conventional, that means micro level focused, short term or micro level, and macro level are innovative, like urban transportation system in a new way, like transit oriented development, or BRTS, MRTS, those kind of things we will look into. And you will also be able to understand the need of the sustainable transportation system when we look into the significance of pollution and their effects, and different kind of transportation modes which are at present we are using. So the sustainable transportation need will emerge automatically when we will go through different slides. You will also be able to plan and implement the non-motorized transportation in cities, because you will know the significance or importance of non-motorized transportation system like walking, cycling, which are zero emission kind of transportation mode. So you will appreciate that. And in developed countries like Denmark, or Netherlands, so many people are using these kind of non-motorized transportation these days. Their infrastructure is developed in that fashion, in fact. So that is the need of the hour here also. If so huge pollution is coming from transportation sector, then we have to shift to other transportation modes which are of least emitting or sustainable in a nature, you can say. So ultimately, I believe that you will be able to prepare the strategy for clean air through transforming the transportation of your city in a sustainable direction. Well, so to meet these objectives, we have these modules and sub-modules you can look into, like correlation of transportation and air pollution. We'll have two sub-modules. One is urban setups and transportation systems in Indian cities. We will look into, because each city has some characteristic kind of transportation system. Then energy and fuel consumption in transportation, how much is there, what is their contribution into emissions. Then we will go for practices for curbing transportation generated air pollution. So that will include like curbing air pollution through micro level approaches, and curbing air pollution through macro level approaches. Macro level approaches will include focus on non-motorized transportation systems and public transportation mode, as well as transit oriented development like MRTS, BRTS, etc. We will look. Curbing air pollution through technological approach will be the third one. So we will give one example of electric vehicles. Otherwise, there are other technologies also. When you change the fuel, when you change the engine, even when we go from BS4 to BS6, so basically we are using the technology to reduce the emissions. Then ultimately we will go for sustainable transportation system with a case study of Delhi Metro, how it is being used for enhancing the sustainable transportation system. So the first module of this particular presentation is correlation of transportation and air pollution. So if you look into the main sources of ground level ambient concentrations of air, that comes predominantly from the transportation sector. Because if you look into these power plants, so they emit at very high elevations, like they are having chimneys or stacks. So their emission comes at very high levels. So when pollution comes to the ground level, it is almost diluted. But the transportation related or vehicular emissions, they are at the height of where we are breathing. So that's why it is more dangerous. And like CO or benzene, etc., they are also found not only in ambient air but also inside the transportation mode, like car. People may think that I am in the car, I am safe, I am not inhaling pollutants, which is a myth. Basically, if you measure some by some sensors and good air pollution monitoring equipments, you will find there may be a lot of pollution level inside the car also. There may be some other sources of indoor nature, so like benzene or CO or some hydrocarbons you may find in high quantity, basically. Well, so when we go for looking into traffic generated air pollution sources, so there are exhaust emissions from tailpipe, and there are like non-exhaust emissions, like resuspension of the dust. When some vehicle is going and this pavement is not good, so dust will resuspend and that will add into particulate matter. There may be emissions from friction of the tire and road. So again, some sort of pollution will be there. There may be heavy metal emissions from application of brakes, right? There may be fugitive emissions from leakage of the engine, some fuel leakage, and whenever we are filling our vehicle or car, etc., then fugitive emissions are there. So there are exhaust emissions as well as non-exhaust emissions. And the pollutants, as I said, there are signatory pollutants for specific sources. For example, if you are given two tables, like one is having high quantity of pollutants in terms of particulate matter or SO2, and then other table gives you high quantity of CO and NOx emissions, NOx concentrations, you will quickly say that the second table maybe that site where this measurement has been done could be near to the highway, because CO and NOx emissions basically comes in large quantities from vehicular emissions. So these pollutants of like particulate matter of fine size, PM 2.5, PM10, and NOx, CO, etc., or NMVOCs, non-methane volatile organic compounds, they come in large quantity from vehicular emissions. There are other trace emissions also, like methane or CO2, and sulfur oxides are also there. Although now we are using ultra low sulfur diesel fuel also in several cities. Well, so if we look into their effects, they may cause several kind of problems of respiratory nature, like asthma, or they can trigger other allergy related issues. They can also affect the lung function, in fact, and ultimately they can result into some cardiovascular problems or even death. So this air pollution has very damaging effects on the health as well as on the environment. Environmental effect could be in several forms, like acid rain or climate change, as you know, and even like these N2, etc. If they go into the stratosphere, they can damage ozone layer also. So the impacts are multifold, and in many ways you can relate the negative impacts of the air pollution. Well, when we go for determinants of the traffic generated air pollutants, which govern or which influence how much emission of these pollutants will come from the vehicular fleet. So there are factors like how many vehicles are on the road. So the number of vehicles will determine how much pollution is there, right? Age of the vehicle, because if old vehicle you are driving, it will emit more emissions. The new vehicles emit less emissions. Of course, their maintenance and inspection related issues may also arise, and that's why old vehicles are discarded after some time, because they are highly polluting or highly emitting sources. Then engine type and condition, like for example, 2-stroke engine, 4-stroke engine in two-wheelers. So when fuel efficiency is good, then per kilometer emissions may be less. You can say that's why people are going from 2-stroke motorcycle to 4-stroke nowadays. most of the two-wheelers are four-stroke engine-driven vehicles. Okay, so engine type also influences the emissions. Then the type of fuel, diesel, petrol, CNG, LPG, all these fuels have different kind of emission streams, right? Also, the meteorology play role, because even if same emission sources are there in two cities, and one is having good wind velocity and the good height of the mixing height, then air pollution load will be means distributed into dispersion, and the concentration will be less. But if the same pollution emission is there in a particular city which is located in a valley kind of formation, where a lot of buildup of pollution gets into over the period of time, then that can give you high concentration or high exposure. So meteorology also plays a role. Shape of the urban environment, as I said, and maybe like if one city has high-rise buildings, then that street canyon effect will be there. How mixing and flushing out of the pollutants may be difficult. Then these traffic organization, if you are having traffic movement without any congestion, then emissions are less. If congestion is more, then traffic speed is low and high level of pollution is there. Because of low speed, more fuel is burnt, more pollution is emitted. Similarly, there are nature of the vehicles, like heavy vehicles, trucks, etc. They emit a lot of pollutants in comparison to other light vehicles. For example, when we compare a car with catalytic converter, so a diesel truck produces around 50 to 100 times more fine and ultra fine particles per kilometer traveled. So that way, the size of the vehicle or type of the vehicle is also responsible for these traffic generated air pollutants variation. And then modern diesel engines emit less PM2.5, but a large number of ultrafine particles than older engines. So this is a trick, because the mass concentration is reduced, but the number, quantity or that is the particles number is increased. So you may be inhaling more number of small particles, ultrafine particles, basically, and that may be more dangerous. Basically, it is under research nowadays that those engines are good or bad. So this kind of debate is going on, because more data is needed to conclude. But of course, if very ultrafine particles, if we are inhaling, even if the mass concentration is less, so those particles have the chance to go into our blood cells, and they may have negative impacts on our respiratory system, lungs, etc. It can go into blood, and if they are a kind of toxic or carcinogenic nature, they can create other problems also. Well, so ultrafine particles, as I said, number particles, and then rather than particle mass is the more important. We have to give due consideration to them, and they have very, very adverse health effects. So that is why new diesels cause more harm than the old ones. This kind of opinion is going on into the community of the researchers. Well, when we talk about health and environmental impacts of air pollution, all of you know that these physical activity is restricted when we are not in good health. If we are having respiratory problem, sneezing, irritation, eye irritation, and like running nose, etc., we are not able to focus on our work, or our efficiency decreases. Then there may be asthmatic problems also. In winter, a lot of pollution is there. Some allergens may be there, and people get into that trigger of that allergic reactions. Cardiovascular diseases could also be there, and there are literature which links air pollution to even lung cancer, or then ultimately the mortality. It can reduce the average age also. As you know, like food or water poisoning, they give immediate effect. If you have consumed contaminated food or contaminated water, you will have some problem like loose motion, those kind of things. But if you are inhaling this polluted air, unless it is very acute exposure, like Bhopal gas tragedy happened, otherwise small concentrations if we are inhaling, then slowly it gives us very negative health effect, and the average age can be less. Maybe like in polluted cities, the average is maybe decreased by 5 or 10 years. You don't know where those years have gone, and it has been taken by the air pollution. If you talk about major impacts on the environment, then it could be of other nature. As I said, acid rain, because of those SOx and NOx emissions, which interact with the moisture into the atmosphere and ultimately get converted into sulfuric acid or nitric acid, and then due to wet deposition, etc., they can come to like water bodies, or it can also change the pH of the soil or runoff waters. Climate change is also big issue because of these air pollutions and especially the greenhouse gas emissions. Now, if you talk about urban setups and transportation system in Indian cities, so as I said earlier, that road transportation is the dominating sector basically, and road transportation means two-wheelers in large number, cars or BRTS, bus rapid transport system, or mini buses, low floor buses. If you talk about the rail, then it is like metro, monorail, local rail, several kind of rail. Now high speed rail is also coming, and people also talking hyperloops, but they are in experimental stage. Now, if we want to understand the gravity of the situation, so let us see the data. Like in 1951, look at here, two-wheelers were around 27,000, cars, jeeps, taxis were around 159,000, buses were only 34,000, goods vehicles 82,000. Now, if you compare, how much in 2000, this was 34 million two-wheelers from 27,000, and this trend you can see. This trend also showing these two-wheelers increase, the steep increase was there. Now still it is increasing, but this type of steep increase is not there. Then cars, jeeps, they are also increasing. So ultimately in 2016, you can see two-wheelers were 169 million, cars, jeeps 30 million. So the population of these vehicles have gone multifold. The total number of vehicles increased from 0.3 million in 1951 to 230 million in 2016. So huge increase in these road transportation vehicles are there, and of course they are using fossil fuels. So naturally that goes into high pollution levels. If we talk about the share of the types of motorized vehicles in India, basically two-wheelers are responsible of around 75% share in Indian transportation, followed by private cars. Basically, you can see different cities in Delhi and Mumbai, everywhere. Two-wheelers are more than these four-wheelers, cars, etc. Okay, two-wheeler ownership have doubled in 2020 compared to 2011. So that means you can say that this public transportation is not meeting the requirement of the mobility, and people are going for their private vehicles, whether two-wheeler or cars. If we look into the issues which are related to the urban transportation system, so like severe congestion is there because of so many vehicles are there in cities, and then increasing greenhouse gas emissions because of a lot of fossil fuel consumption in those road vehicles. Then it can also increase road accidents, which is also havoc nowadays. There are so many bad news every time. Growth in number of private vehicles is you have seen those numbers basically. So if you look into the congestion, these kind of pictures show in each city we face these kind of situations where lot of congestion, traffic jams are there, and we are losing our precious time, as well as burning lot of fuel and polluting the air. Again, it is coming as a negative health impact basically. And if you want to visualize what is the stage of congestion, so 3 Indian cities is considered as top 10 world congested cities basically, like this Mumbai and Bengaluru and Delhi on 2nd, 6th and 8th rank, if you consider the 10 most congested cities in the world. So these are the situation which warns us that we have to do something to relieve the space in these cities. Well, when we talk about air pollution, so we have earlier also seen that this transportation sector and basically the road transportation is responsible for more than 90% of this CO2 emissions, if you look into this. The second is the civil aviation, and then these railways. So huge scope is there to do something to the road transportation to reduce the emissions. When road accidents are considered, you can see around 151,000 fatalities occur annually. This is huge figure. So, and they are mostly, young fellows, and that's kind of tragedy. If the whole family get disturbed and affected, India is accounted for around 6% of global road traffic incidents or accidents. 70% accidents, as I said, they involve the young Indians, and that is very, very pathetic situation, you can say. When we talk about the number of vehicles in terms of the growth of the private vehicle ownership, you can see how it is increasing over the years. So huge, vehicle ownership is there, and the number registered vehicle across India 2001 to 2009 shows this particular figure. And average annual growth is there around 9 to 10%, and this ownership has increased 438% in 2019 if we compare with the ownership of 2001. Well, basically, when ownership of private vehicle is increasing, indirectly you can say declining of the share into the public transportation. That means people are not going towards public transportation. Reasons may be many. Okay, so you can see here only just 18.1% of the total work trips are through public transportation system. More people are using, two-wheelers like motorcycle, around 23 million. And in 2015 data, number of daily trips using motorcycle for commuting was around 35 million, excluding other personal trips. So that way you can see, means huge scope is there. If we can address and we can shift, privately owned, this privately owned vehicle population to use the public transportation system. Now, if we look into this energy and fuel consumption in transportation, so that we can appreciate how much energy is used in transportation system, and so you can look into this figure, like 87% of world's total power production is derived from fossil fuels, and those fossil fuels are basically driving, whole economic structure of the world. That's why we call it carbon-based economy, because fossil fuels are hydrocarbons basically, right? Transportation activities are significant energy consumers. So out of this, whatever energy is produced by fossil fuels, although there are renewable resources, but there are only 13% on an average. So the huge quantity of fossil fuel is being used to produce the energy, and the larger share of that energy is also being used by the transportation sector to provide the mobility to passengers and to also transport the freight. Well, transportation accounts around 20 to 25% of world energy use, which is a huge quantity basically. Look into this, in Indian context, energy used by the mode of and vehicle types. So here, heavy trucks, 2020 data and 2005 data. So there was this much amount of the heavy trucks. Now they are using this much of petajoules. So huge increase is there in the use of the energy by these heavy trucks. Okay, and then the cars are also there. That has within 15 years this much increase is there. If you look into this increase of the fuel consumption like diesel and petrol, so diesel consumption very high, then petrol consumption. So increasing trend is there basically, because number of vehicles are increasing and number of needs for the transportation of goods and the passenger is there, and many vehicles which are using diesel and petrol, so they are plying on the road, so they are using these fuels. So increasing trend is there. Well, if you look into this, petrol, which is almost 99% consumed by the transportation sector. So two-wheelers and cars are the major, consumers of the this petrol or gasoline you can call. So if we, can shift the population from two-wheelers or cars, we can really win the war to reduce the consumption of petrol in that sense. If you look into diesel, so private cars, people, because diesel has been cheap earlier, still now there is little bit difference, but still it is cheaper than petrol. So many people use diesel driven cars. Then trucks, of course, they use the diesel, So the larger share of diesel is being used by this particular transportation mode, which we can, if we shift on like freight into railways or inland waterways, then we can reduce this kind of consumption of the diesel. You can see largest diesel consumption around 28% by heavy commercial vehicles basically and light commercial vehicles. Now, to appreciate the situation in terms of global average CO2 emissions, you look aviation per kilometer, freight per kilometer and per ton emission of the CO2 in terms of grams. So most of the emissions come from the aviation, then medium trucks and heavy trucks in terms of freight. In terms of passengers, large cars are responsible for maximum emission of CO2, and then aviation is there, and then average cars basically. So now we come to the second module of this presentation, which focus on practices for curbing transportation generated air pollution. How to curb, how to control, how to reduce. So there are three approaches basically. One is micro level approach, the second is macro level approach, and the third one is technological approach. So these three broad categories we will discuss. What is curbing air pollution through micro level approach? Look into this. Like we can implement certain wall-to-wall pavement if soil is loose and pavement is not covered properly, then to reduce the resuspension of dust-related emissions, we can do wall-to-wall pavement. Also, we can do like black topping of metallic roads so that smooth drive is there, and non-exhaust emissions can also be reduced, as well as that resuspension of dust will be reduced. Creation of green buffers, which can reduce the dispersion of pollutants from one particular you can say distance. Maintenance of forest cover, urban forest can be there, as you see, people say that this ridge in the Delhi, that is the lungs of Delhi. So in each city, those kind of parks or greenery or green belt, as well as small forest covers can be there. Then introduction of water fountains where a lot of particulate pollutions is there, so that can help to get down those particulate pollution as the deposition. Fog cannon, anti-smoke guns, those have been used at certain places. I'm not sure about their effectiveness or efficiency. So this is the kind of these gun and fog cannon, anti-smoke gun and fog cannon which is used. So basically it sprays a lot of water up to height of 50 meter, and then the droplets of that water get into contact with particulate dust, and then by gravity it settles down, so that way it can clean the environment. But I don't know the efficacy and efficiency. Well, micro level approach to curb traffic induced air pollutions can be there through like expressways, so that if people are going to some other state or some other city, and your city is in between, so they don't need to cross your city. They can go, like in Delhi now we have these Eastern Periphery Expressway, Western Periphery Expressway. So if somebody is going from UP to Rajasthan, they don't need to cross Delhi. They can go by these expressways or peripheral roads. So this can avoid heavy traffics, and a lot of emissions which come from heavy traffic can be avoided basically. It can also reduce traffic congestion and minimize this excess pollution because of traffic jams at particular points, and it can be done through widening of the roads also. But some people talk that if you widen the road, then it is a kind of experience that more vehicle is there to occupy that space, but that can be managed by some traffic rules, etc. Better parking facilities can be developed, like multi-level parking, so that people don't need to park on the side of the road, because otherwise that space is occupied and little space is available for moving. Again, that reduces your speed, and there are several other issues which result into congestion and traffic jam. We can also go for discarding old vehicles, so that if we go for the new vehicle, then emission is less. But then affordability should be there. So maybe some mechanism can be there, like easy loans, etc. So those are the policy matters basically which government can look into. If you talk about a micro level approach action plan as an example, we can look into like Lucknow city. which is one of the largest cities of UP and capital city also. You look into this sources of air pollution. So this report where we have taken data says that road dust is the dominating source in that city basically. 92% in total, which contains 87%, this road dust, and then this 5% comes from this vehicular pollutants, this much. So the total is 92%, which we can control if we can go for better transportation infrastructure basically. Look into this micro level approaches. So it can be through widening of the bottleneck where traffics get congested. Then construction of some peripheral road is recommended, can be done. Arrangement of multi-level parking facilities are needed so that, as I said, people don't need to park on odd spaces. Then extensive launch of these some campaigns can be there where strict compliance can be there of those rules and regulations, and then other these implementation of plans could be, for example, 33% forest cover area in the city master plan is there, which should be implemented in letter and spirit. And the canal side roads should be brick lined and proper plantation can be carried out so that dust emissions can be significantly reduced. Then there are certain several places where potholes are there, so this could be some maintenance mechanism must be there to make the roads free from the potholes, and free flow can be ensured so that people don't need to apply brakes everywhere, and smooth is the road. Then black topping of the metal road, including payment of the road shoulders, is required for better this infrastructure, road infrastructure, you can say. Then next is curbing air pollution through macro level approach, which includes like non-motorized transport, NMT, and public transport and transit oriented development. So when we talk about this NMT, so basically NMT is like rickshaw or cycling or walking, and of course this is very healthy way of doing this. If we can integrate different kind of modes of the transport, then NMT is the best. And let me share with you the experiences of Germany. They have dedicated lanes for cycles, for pedestrians, so people feel motivated to use them. And their transportation system like buses, trains, etc., they also have the space. You can take your bike, means bicycle with you, and you get down at the station, then you go office by your bicycle. So those kind of integration of infrastructure is needed for promoting the NMT. And the mobility through NMT is healthy because it is like physical exercise also, right? When we talk about non-motorized transportation related models here, you look into Delhi or Bangalore, etc., it is basically decreasing. This NMT share is decreasing, except in a few cities like Chennai or Patna, right? So that means maybe people don't have those infrastructure facilities which can encourage people to use these kind of modes of the transport. And people blame that rickshaws, they cause congestion on the roads, but basically the reason is the mixed traffic. If we have segregated lanes and dedicated lanes for rickshaw, then they are very good mode of last mile connectivity. They can take you to a particular station, then there you can have the public transportation system. And around 24% of Delhi's metro trips are basically dependent on rickshaws. So see their very significant role. Okay, so those erroneous perception which we should not carry, that these are the reasons for traffic congestion, etc. Rather, we can say poor planning is the reason for that congestion. If we talk about key policy initiatives by this Ministry of Urban Development, so for example, in the first two principles of the National Mission for Sustainable Habitat included walk and cycle, basically, in the action plan, Prime Minister's National Action Plan on Climate Change. So a lot of stress was given on walk and cycle. If you talk about vision of the National Urban Transport Policy, that also included NMT. So emphasis was given on NMT, that last mile connectivity must be through NMT basically. And the Ministry of Urban Development has developed service level benchmarks for urban transportation in Indian cities, which integrates NMT with other systems basically. So, for example, you can have cycles at certain locations where people can use. There are ways to hire them, rent them. So there have been several policy initiatives. For example, Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission 2005. It focused on large-scale infrastructure projects, including the urban transportation, which requires NMT, as an integral component of that transportation planning, basically. In 2006, this was adopted, and emphasis was given to develop infrastructure to promote the NMT. As I said, the dedicated lanes or other issues. When we talk about urban transport, public transport in India, then the popular ones are like MRTS, Mass Rapid Transport System, that is metro, BRTS, Bus Rapid Transport System, and which is exclusive for like having exclusive bus lanes, local trains or monorail or mini buses. All these are a part of urban public transportation system. When we talk about this metro, so you look into this metro system, which is available in several cities like Delhi, Bangalore, Chennai, Jaipur, Lucknow, and other cities also demanding metro, looking at success story of the metro in like Delhi and other cities. Well, BRTS system has come up in some other cities because BRTS is quite cheap if you compare the investment in comparison to MRTS. So like Surat, Ahmedabad, Indore, they are having wonderful BRTS system, although it failed in Delhi, and there are several reasons of that. I don't want to go into that, but BRTS system is one good urban public transportation system basically. Okay, then people are talking about multimodal transport for efficient public transportation basically, because when we connect BRTS with feeder buses and then last mile connectivity through NMTs, then multimodal transportation system can be developed. And you look here, like from home, maybe you can use your car or you can use some rickshaw. You reach to like bus station or the metro, and you can then use the bus, feeder bus, etc. So that way it is interconnected. Ultimately, you can also walk. You can go to the destination, which may be commercial center or your office. So walking, bicycle, usage of bicycle, rickshaws, two-wheelers, and for access those modes of the transportation, whether it is BRTS, MRTS, and again exiting and using those NMTs. So those kind of connectivity of multimodal transportation system is the need of the hour. Now, if you talk about the transit-oriented development, which is very new concept of the land use planning, where this one particular stretch is developed in terms of BRTS or MRTS of very huge capacity for public transportation system, and along that corridor, lot of development occurs. So that is the new concept, and it is being used in several metro cities. Like wherever this MRTS system or BRTS system is there, TOD is the one thing which can easily be integrated. So creation of compact and walkable spaces where pedestrians can walk freely without any fear of accidents, and mixed use communities are centered in and around high quality trains or bus systems. So this is where TOD emerges and comes into practice. So regional planning or city revitalization or suburban renewables or walkable neighborhoods are the part of this TOD system or transit oriented development system. There are several benefits of TOD basically, like it gives us better access to live, work, and play, or having high quality of life, because there is very reliable, very fast commutation system in terms of BRTS, MRTS. You don't need to travel or through your car or your vehicle, which creates a lot of stress. Comfortable journey can be through MRTS. So quality of life also increases when you have less stress and you don't get exposed to polluted areas. Greater mobility, ease of moving is there, and increased transit ridership in the sense because it carries a lot of people. So this also results in less congestion or less emissions, because when private vehicles are moving, so they are running on some fossil fuel, they are emitting a lot of emissions. But when you are using public transportation system like MRTS, so per capita emission is very low and there is no accidents. When less number of traffic is there on the road, congestion is less, accident is less, injuries are less, deaths are less. Okay, so reduced household spending on transportation can easily be achieved by this TOD. And healthier lifestyle, because you can walk, you can use some NMT for reaching to those metro station or bus station. So that way also it is healthy because it provides in your neighborhood. You don't need to go by your car, etc. You can easily go through NMT also, like rickshaw, etc. Higher property values, because when development occurs in and around this TOD system, then prices of the property increases. Okay, then increased foot traffic and customers for area businesses, because people walk and mixed use that area is there. You can meet your several kind of demands. Reduced pollution and environmental damages are the co-benefits, you can say. And it does not encourage the horizontal sprawl, rather it goes for vertical development, so that many people lives in densely populated areas, of course in comfort way, good vertical flats, etc. And then they go and access these transportation modes. It can also gives you better economic opportunities, because you reach your destination or your office or your workplace in time and very fast. There are 8 principles basically which are used for this TOD, transit oriented development, like connect or walk, then cycle, transit, mixed use, compact development, densification of the population, and shifting from this privately owned vehicle to the public transportation system. So like connect, as I said, connectivity is there in those areas, and greater amount of access is granted to the most of the people, many people. It is inclusive, connection is there in all segments of people, because like MRTS, poor people can also use. Otherwise cars you can afford if you are of good income group strata of the society, but poor people can't afford car. But MRTS, everybody can afford. So that way it is inclusive and equitable mode of the transportation. Each station increases reach into the larger community, and the economy thrives because of that particular. Walking is encouraged because very short distances are there to go to the station, or to go to the shopping center, or mall and educational institutions, or wherever. Very shorter distances can be planned in that way, that transit oriented system. Cycling is encouraged because dedicated lanes can be provided in those localities. When you are having less number of cars or less number of privately owned vehicles, you will have a lot of space, empty space, that you can use for dedicated lanes for cycling, for pedestrians, and some shading, trees can be planted, so that in summer people can walk without sweating. So many means you can think, and creatively you can apply many things in that sense. Well, it also promotes transit system, because as I said, high capacity these MRTS or BRTS system is there, so a lot of people commutes by using them. Then frequency can also be adjusted depending upon when high demand is there or when low demand is there. Like Delhi Metro, in peak hours, 2 to 3 minutes frequency is there. After 2 minutes, after 3 minutes, you can have another metro. So you don't need to wait for long, right? And capacity is very high, because like 8 coach metros has around 400 seats, and frequency is very high. So a lot of people can move within shorter period of time. Densification is there, like not horizontal sprawl is there, but densification at high-rise buildings can be constructed, and then many people can live in those buildings. So they don't need to then travel horizontal distances, rather they will come, they will walk to the station, or they will hire rickshaw and go to the station. It is in nearby locations. Compact development is there because there are many things within that particular area. So you can meet different kind of demands in that particular area. Mixed development is there. So at a particular place you go, so you will have the complexes for entertainment or for shopping, right? So many things are there. So mixed development of the species can again help you to do your other things in minimum possible time. Shifting, as I said, from those personal mobility like cars, etc., to multimodal transportation system by using public transportation system and using non-motorized transportation system or just walking. So those kind of shift is there from cars and two-wheelers in a good sense, so that it can result into very less kind of emissions and more comfortable journey. You can see one example of this TOD urban center. So parking facilities and then office employment are there. You can see like non-motorized transport friendly infrastructure can be there here. Dedicated lanes are there. Then if you want to go from one side to other, so these for pedestrians, those bridges may also be there. So those kind of integrated development can be ensured, and distances are very short, so you can easily walk and go from one place to another. So for the planning of the TOD, basically you have to look into the opportunities, how many ridership may be there, how many trips can be generated, or what are the constraints, whether land use patterns are there to support the transit system or not. If land is expensive, then it is difficult. Otherwise, you have to spend a lot of money. Then private, partnership can be encouraged, so that investment comes from private sector also. So you can see this from looking into the opportunities to changes in the master plan, and then go for meeting the design standards and integrating the land use plan to support the transit systems, and also inviting the private sector to take part into those developments, so that they can also get benefit out of that activity. Well, so TOD policy in India is being encouraged, and because it is enabling transformation from privately owned vehicles, or the dominated scenario of the privately owned vehicles, to the public transport oriented development. And it also encourage the accessible public transportation system. Easily accessibility is there for all kind of people. It is designed in that way. It is affordable and it is quick also. Then it also encourages the walkable communities, so that people are more healthy rather. When we talk about the impact on air quality of these urban public transportation systems, then it's very simple to see, because when we are using our own vehicles, then we are burning a lot of fuel and emitting a lot of emissions of the pollutants. You look here, like when we compare single occupancy vehicles, public transportation produces 95% less carbon dioxide. You could imagine how much reduction in emissions are there. 92% fewer volatile organic compounds, VOCs, which are toxic, which also produce ozone. Ozone is toxic as well as greenhouse gas, because VOCs are precursors. Then 45% less carbon dioxide, 48% less nitrogen oxide. So in different kind of vehicle category, if we compare, then lot of reduction is there. And here also public transportation system and this automobiles, you see very less amount of CO or VOCs if we compare with respect to the automobiles. Now we come to the curbing of the air pollution through technological approaches. For example, we are taking electric vehicles. Okay, so electric vehicles, as you know, because there is no exhaust emissions, they are very clean in that sense, and you need electricity to charge the battery. So if electricity is produced from renewable sources, this is wonderful option, because it will not emit anything from tailpipe emissions. There is no tailpipe emission basically. Of course, people are arguing nowadays that because the battery weight is there, through application of brake, more non-exhaust emissions will be there. Those kind of apprehensions are coming. But I am sure that through innovation and creativity, better batteries will be there, and this particular mode of transportation will pick up and will change the complete scenario of urban transportation. And there are a lot of policies from government of India which is pushing this e-vehicle in our cities. So you look into the clean source of energy, because electricity is clean source of energy if we are taking it from solar or wind, etc. If it is from thermal power plants, etc., then this is an issue that you are shifting emissions from cities to other places. But still, I always say that because those emissions which we are shifting is having a great advantage in the sense because those emissions were at the breathing level from these vehicles. And now the emissions, if they are in coal-based thermal power plants, they will be through stacks at very high, levels. So those will be diluted basically. But greenhouse gases is an issue basically, and if you can't capture it, then it is a difficult issue. Well, so there are several benefits of the electric vehicles. You can see there is no exhaust pollutants or greenhouse gas emissions, and like IC engines. Conversion of energy is not so efficient as in case of electric motor. This converts energy into motion very quickly, very efficiently. And you can say like EVs are zero tailpipe emission vehicles if the charging of batteries through renewable sources. So that's why we are in parallel also increasing solar power and wind energy. Those kind of renewable resources we are increasing day by day in capacity and in intensity. If we talk about this Delhi government's draft notification for e-vehicles in February only, they gave directions to the transport department, and they have asked that all aggregators or delivery service providers like food delivery or e-commerce logistic providers, couriers, etc., they should adopt electrical vehicles basically in terms of new onboarded fleet as per proportion, so that their use increases. And within 3 months from this notification, they are asking that 10% of the two-wheelers should go for this electric vehicles, and up to 31st March of next year 2023, the 50% of two-wheelers should be converted into these electric vehicles. And if you talk about four-wheelers, then target is for 3 months 5%, and up to next year it is 25% basically. So the impact on air quality is much better because there is no exhaust emissions. But as I said, there are issues only the energy sources related, because if we are getting it from coal-based power plants, etc., then particulate emissions will be there or SO2 emissions will be there. So we need to think about that, and maybe good electrostatic precipitator we can use to capture the particulate emissions, and then other scrubbers, etc., for reducing the SO2 emissions. If we take the case study of Delhi in terms of air quality, so you can look into this because this is the capital city of our country, and every time, especially in winters, when because of some meteorological conditions and this pollution built up, then air quality index is an issue. Now, to understand and better this urban air quality issue, if we look into the case of the Delhi, so this Delhi is the capital city of our country, and in winter, it gets very poor air quality because of several reasons, including harsh weather and low mixing height, as well as local emissions, plus transportation of from nearby states some emissions. So the actions have been taken basically, and like CNG buses were implemented or included in the transportation fleet. So this is a kind of technological approach, you can say, alternative fuels, and a lot of air quality improvement was observed in terms of basically the visible smoke reduction, and the clean air was visible, and particulate matter was reduced. But when people measured the fine particles and the NOx emissions. Later on, the number of fleets increased, and there were papers or publications which said that maybe fine particles are still an issue. Then this metro was included into public transportation system. It gave very good result because it catered a lot of people which otherwise would have been using privately owned vehicles like two-wheelers or cars, etc. So that way, this has been a success story, and this is again one macro approach you can see. Similarly, bicycle and pedestrian friendly infrastructure through this TOD, this was also promoted. So that is again macro approach. So in that way, you can say that this case of Delhi has inclusion of several interventions of these approaches which we have discussed. Other approaches like retirement age of the heavy diesel vehicles were reduced, so that was a kind of micro approach, and usage of e-rickshaw for last mile connectivity was encouraged and promoted, so that is technological approach. Similarly, odd-even scheme was followed for certain periods, that was a micro approach, though results were debatable. Smoke towers and intense air quality monitoring has been also there on experimental basis of this smoke tower, so that is another technological approach. Water sprinkling in case of worst cases of the dust pollution, that is the micro approach. And pilot study has been conducted to create EV charging network, so that is another technological approach. So that way, macro level approach and technological interventions have been implemented in Delhi to improve the air quality. Well, now this last module of this presentation is related to sustainable transportation system, and Delhi Metro has been taken as a case study. So you can look into this particular case study in a very encouraging and motivating way, because results are wonderful basically if you look at a success story. Well, mode, if you compare with the unit energy consumed, if we consider metro consuming 1 energy, then the buses consume 3 units of the energy, two-wheelers need 5 units, AC buses need 6, petrol car needs 21, diesel cars need 21. So that way, metro is very efficient way of commutation, basically. Most energy efficient transportation system at present if you compare with other alternatives. And there are several benefits, basically, because fuel saving is there, it runs through electricity, right? And it takes off private automobiles from the road, so congestion is reduced, basically. Then travel time is reduced because there is no traffic jam, and the speed is very high, in comparison to our privately owned vehicles. There is no emission reduction is there. Then reliability, because the timetable is fixed and it runs on time. Then there is no accident on the streets, which is because of sometimes people drive very rash and accidents happen. Average daily ridership has increased, from 2002 to 2015. If you look into different phases, like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 of the metro, in different phases it was implemented, basically. So the ridership is increasing, and this is an indication. This is a comfortable and fast mode of the transportation. That's why most of the people are shifting towards metro. So that's a wonderful, case study. And average daily ridership has increased by 156% if you compare data from 2010 to 2015, basically within 5 years. So that way means this is the most liked transport system in Delhi. Then there are very environment friendly policies by DMRC which have been incorporated to operate this Delhi Metro. So there are like water policy or quality related policy, solar policy, energy management policy, waste management policy, environment policy. All these policies have been incorporated, and all those environmental laws and regulations like Environmental Protection Act, whatever is there, all these provisions are there in operation of the this metro. Well, when we talk about green initiatives which has been taken by metro, and there are good indicators this is a success story in terms of like Green Leadership Award of 2019. It won. Then Metro Bhavan is rated as the green building as per the US Green Building Council. All phase 3 metro stations and depots are designed and constructed according to the platinum level, that is the highest green rating system basically. Then there are green stations, so 30 to 35% energy saving is there. So those provisions have been made basically. Okay, 50% reduction in lighting power density is there because the smart lights have been incorporated at various places. So 10 to 15% improvements in efficiency of heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system is there. Okay, as per this American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning, and energy conservation building code requirements. So all those international standards have been properly fulfilled in those activities of the DMRC and metro running. CO2 monitoring is there at areas so that no suffocation is there, and good ventilation system is there. Extensive use of these variable frequency drives are there to control the speed of the motors of the ACs as per air quality. Then solar panels are installed on top elevated metro stations and depots and parking areas. So a lot of solar energy is being converted into electricity basically. Live controlling and monitoring of all auxiliary load through building management system is there. So you can say very advanced technologies have been used for running this particular system in energy efficient way. Reducing energy consumption is there, like clean development mechanism. This is the basically first metro rail and rail based system in the world which has earned carbon credits and by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, and this has reduced around pollution around 6.3 lakh tons every year. So this is kind of great achievement in that term of greenhouse gas emission reduction and air pollution reduction. If you talk about emission reduction of 2014, you can see this metro operation around 6.7 million tons emission reduction has been achieved in terms of CO2 emission, basically greenhouse gas emission. When we talk about co-benefits, okay, so there are several co-benefits. Co-benefits means some benefits we get just as a positive side effect, right? So like number of vehicles off the road daily because of this phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 which was implemented. So many thousands of vehicles have gone off the road because the people have shifted to the metro. Then annual reduction of fuel consumption because of that, when vehicles are not on the road, so they are not consuming fuel, right? So reduction of pollutants is also there. You can see huge quantity in terms of tons, like 31,000 ton, 1,79,000 ton, huge quantity. Okay, in 2014 around 57,000, 5,77,000 rather. Annual reduction in fatal accidents are there. You can see the number is increasing because there is less population in terms of these privately owned vehicles flying on the road. Annual reduction in all accidents has also be there in a significant number. Well, when we talk about other co-benefits, you can look into like time saving, cost saving, okay, less pollution, accidents saved. So all these you can convert into monetary terms. So around 10,000 crore saving is there by this phase 1 and phase 2 in 2014 study. And the Delhi Metro Rail Corporation has received around 2.41 crore from the sale of that total 82,000 certified emission reduction which has been carried out by these different measures which have they incorporated. So this carbon credit system or scheme by this Japan Finance Carbon Limited, so they have enabled this metro system to earn 2.41 crore out of these efforts basically. There are other initiatives to reduce energy consumption, like they are using variable voltage, variable frequency drives so that less current is used during acceleration and deceleration of these systems. And you can also see like these heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems are using advanced technologies which can control when it is needed more as per their temperature, humidity, etc. So open or closed loop mechanism of environmental control system has been used to get very efficient working. Then solar power plants at depots and stations, you can see they are being used, and they are converting solar energy into electricity. These you can see on this Delhi metro station, ITO metro station basically, and this is Anand Vihar metro station. These pictures show, and landscaping is good, so aesthetically it looks beautiful, as well as the space is properly designed. So ITO metro station and Mandi House metro station, landscaping and paved flooring outside the metro stations, which reduces the dust. So the double benefit you can see, aesthetically it is pleasing, as well as it is reducing the resuspension of dust related pollution. Well, then waste to energy powered metro, the first metro in India which is receiving power generated from waste to energy plant. There are two streams, you can say. If this bio gas generating through anaerobic digestion, if that calorific value waste is there, otherwise solid waste can be burnt, and steam can be produced, and electricity can be produced. So there are two streams basically to convert waste into energy. Tree plantation have been done by DMRC, and approximately 5,000, more than 5,000 ton of CO2 has been removed because they absorb the CO2, and 12,000 ton oxygen per year. So you can say reduction of the CO2 more than 5,000 ton, and production of oxygen more than 12,000 ton per year because of these ecological features of supported by DMRC. Then there are feeder systems, last mile connectivity, low floor buses and better buses are there. Through bicycle system is also there at certain places, like 18 lots on experimental basis, and people are increasingly using those things. So this is all, and we can conclude by saying that poor air quality is a major concern in Indian cities, and one of the major contributor into that poor quality is transport sector related emission. So there are various ways to mitigate negative impacts of transportation sector so that we can improve the air quality, and there is a need for a holistic approach so that we can integrate different kind of transport modes, and multimodal transportation system can be encouraged, as well as non-motorized transportation system and public transportation system has to be integrated. That will have not only benefits in terms of reduction of emissions and pollution, but also it will give us to live a healthy life. Similarly, this transit oriented development, TOD, that is like in Delhi metro we have seen, or some BRTS system we can see. So that can be promoted, so that people need to use bare minimum their vehicles, whether they can use NMTs and reach metro stations or BRTS system, and then they can go anywhere, wherever they want to go, with minimum spending money, minimum emission, and minimum time. So this is lot of advantages are there by going for this integrated transportation system. So that way, this is the role of transportation system in city action plan, and I hope you will apply these learning which we have discussed in terms of case studies, in terms of different concepts, so you can apply in your city. But as I said that initially, I said each city has its peculiar character, so please look into that character, and accordingly you suggest that how that transportation mode can be shifted from these privately owned fossil fuel based automobiles to either an NMT or maybe a public transportation system. So this is all for this particular presentation. These are the references for additional information which you can go through. And now this floor is open for question and answer. So please feel free to ask anything which you want related to this presentation, or if you want to make some comments, or you want to share your experiences, you are welcome. Thank you for your kind attention.